Story Talkies, and this is one of the special ones. We-Storytellers turns one this month, and we thought we should be speaking to someone who is a master in the world of writing, who is a craftsman of words. So we thought that we will bring in someone very special this time. Story Talkies, as you know, is conversations that matter, and we try to find nuances in creating new stories, creating engaging stories. So our guest tonight is Dan Nelken. Dan is a celebrated and a very respected copywriter. He has worked with international brands, and he's based in Canada, and he has been working and has worked with top agencies in his country. His work has gone on to raise millions of dollars for startups, and I'm sure for the established brands, he has brought them much closer to their consumers. And Dan currently is writing a book, which is out sometime this year. And he is sharing his experiences and learning with the young copywriters, people who are trying out the whole sphere of writing. And tonight he's going to talk to us about the whole process of writing, the creative process, as he calls it. So with that, Dan, welcome to Story Talkies, and we are very happy to have you, and especially on our anniversary edition.
Well, thank you for having me, and happy anniversary or happy birthday. Congratulations. I know from creating content that it's no small feat, and every week or however often you produce content. I know for me, I'm always like, this week I'm gonna stop. I can't do it, and every week I find the will and I do it, and I'm so proud of myself and happy that I've got it done. So yeah, thank you for the lovely intro too. I don't know about master, but yeah, I think I'm sharing content and kind of learning as I go, and learning as much as anyone, and I've really been.
Dan, we would like to know about the creative process. What exactly is the creative process? Is it something which is just there, either you have it or you don't have it, or is it something that you nurture and you build and you kind of perfect the art as you go?
I think early in my career, the creative process was just chaos. It was like, I still have anxiety and self-doubt, but it was off the charts in the beginning. And I think it's because a lot of people treat creativity as this magic or kind of witchcraft, and they expect it just to happen. And when it doesn't, and you face the blank page, that's when panic and self-doubt and self-defeating thoughts kick in, imposter syndrome as well. But I think what I've since learned when I've started to try and teach the process, I've had to think about my own. And I do realize now that it is very much a process. Structure, I think a lot of creative people really identify with the chaos. It is part of their identity. I think that causes, on a higher level, they're identifying with the tortured artists, and you see celebrities who go down these paths. And so I think they fight against this idea of control or structure, because it goes against all things that are creative. But what I've learned from doing this is that's the very thing that helps you with self-doubt, imposter syndrome. I don't think you get rid of it, but there is a structure to creativity. And when you break it down, I think that's where you get the power and strength and confidence from. Because if you do it the way I did earlier in my career, if you don't know how you do what you do, it's impossible to be confident, because you don't know if you can replicate it. But once you break it down, and you don't know completely, because there is still elements of this magic, but I'd say most of it is about process and structure. And I think all businesses and brands, agencies, they say their creativity is their product, but most of them don't know anything about how it works and what the brain needs to be creative. Most of them don't have a process. Most of them are scheduling meetings when people are at their peak creative hours in the day. There's just so much that's wrong with it. And I think because early in my career, I suffered a burnout. It was awful, but I feel so fortunate because it's set me down this path to prevent other people from doing it and really look at the creative process. I think, yeah, that for most people and agencies, there still isn't one. And that's why people are working crazy hours, burning out. I don't think we have to, but you have to stop and kind of look at what else we could do. So yeah, I think it's changed for me, what it was, and now I feel like what I know it is.
So what you're saying is that creativity has a structure, has guardrails. It's not that opaque, and it's not something that you're groping in the dark. You if you have the structure in your mind, of course, creativity is boundless. But the moment you put it into a form, it helps you express.
I think without guardrails or any kind of border, most of us wouldn't create anything. And I think that's why, I had written recently, like, to think outside the box, you first have to put yourself in one. I think a lot of creative people, that's why they don't create for themselves. They'd probably rather not create for a brand. Even people working for these brands, everyone would like to have like full control of their lives, and but we don't put ourselves in boxes. There's no timelines, there's no message to communicate, and so I think, having, especially if you're stuck, it's like, what is the first creatively? It's usually because you're considering every possible option. As soon as you limit yourself, you can start coming up with ideas. So that's time. You can limit yourself through time, the medium, the message, and keeping it single-minded. I think that's why it's so important to make messages about one thing. That's also a guardrail. A lot of brands and businesses want to get everything into a message or a piece of communication. Like, it not only makes that message hard to deliver, it makes it hard to receive. Like, it's ineffective both ways. So holding yourself to that one message, like, really helps creativity flourish. As soon as you add multiple things to it, it's watered down, and it's really hard to communicate effectively and emotionally, and build a connection.
What you say, it's very important, structure and messaging. Now, these are the two things that we storytellers, we focus on, to each and every person in the team and to people we work with. And it's more difficult to convince the clients, actually, to say that you to think of the messaging first and before you start creating something. And that's where we come in today. Client briefs, right? One of the most dreaded things that in our kind of businesses, because clients want something done yesterday. They want everything on the table, and they want to say everything that is there in that one piece of content or one piece of writing that they've. How do we try to convey more in less? Definitely a tougher thing than writing a long form.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think to your point, the hardest part is convincing a client to make it about one thing. And I think that's the hardest part, really, of a creative. And I think there's some creatives who are amazing thinkers conceptually, but not great at selling their work. And so that is a big part of it. I think there's different analogies we can use. There's one creative director, well, he's retired now, but founded one of the top agencies in Canada. It was the top. I think it was actually the #1 agency in Canada last year too. His name is Chris Stables. And he used this ping pong ball analogy with clients. And he would say, if I threw 8 balls at you, how many would you catch? Just chaos. If I throw 1 at you, you're much more likely to catch that one ball. And so I've used that many times with clients. And so it's helping them understand it. I think it's even our job as they start to try and complicate it, to educate them. We'll still fail most times, I'm sure. But we have to try. And so I guess, your other question or was about conveying more with less. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously time, and you touched on that too, that especially now with so many different mediums and people want things so quickly in so many different forms. And to go back to creative process, I think if you had a structure and a process, you could be a more efficient thinker. But ultimately, I think, it's no secret, but it's just like having one message. I've seen how many briefs. What is the single most persuasive thing we can say? And there's 4 things. It's like, what is the one thing? And there's always 4 things. So even in a brief, we don't get it right. But I think, so conveying more with less time, you absolutely need time. And there's that classic Mark Twain quote, but I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one, which I think we hear a lot, but it definitely applies. And then I think, I mean, it all goes back to that brief. If you have that one thing, like that's, you measure everything up against that. If it's not serving that one thing, you throw it out. But when you have to serve three things, it's just going to get longer and longer. And also, having one thing allows you, instead of talking about the other things, to add context, to build an emotional connection, to be creative, to have fun, and inject personality. Every brand wants to add personality, but they don't, because they're just hammering like benefits and talking about themselves the whole time. So as opposed to, here's a benefit, and now here's a benefit of that benefit to you and your life, instead of just filling it with mostly crap that people probably don't care about. And then of course, there's editing, and you need time to edit. You need time to walk away from a piece of creative and to be able to revisit it. I'm forgetting who said it, but someone smarter than me had talked about editing and said, keep taking away until it doesn't make any sense, and then add just a little bit more in. So yeah, I think that's how I would to get more out of something, to more with less.
Being ruthless with your own writing, not being in love with what you've written, but be able to look at it very critically and say, okay, this is not something that I want to present. One of the things that also happens is when you talk about messages, brief is one part where we do get very vague briefs, and we also get very vague feedback, which says, okay, this is just not working. Now, what is not working? Is the message not working? Is the tone not working? That's when we tend to get lost. How do we get the right feedback from our clients? How do we get them to pinpoint and talk to us? Because the way a creative person or a way a writer would see something, and the way the client has perceived it, there might be a difference. How do I bridge that gap?
I mean, that's tough. I mean, I feel like just even in this moment when I feel stumped to have an answer for you, I think it's okay with clients. I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to have the immediate response in these meetings or when getting feedback. I think it's okay to table it and get back to them with to figure it out for yourself. I think we always putting so much pressure on ourselves, we should just have the answers. So I would say that's one thing. And I think a lot of it starts in the beginning. It's almost like a contract. That brief's a contract. If they sign off on that brief, then you can, and the brief is tight, we can measure it against that and say, okay, well, your feedback is contradicting this. So maybe this is a different project. Maybe we handle that next. And it's really just holding them to that. And then if it changes and they're adamant, I think at least you want them to acknowledge that they're changing it, so they can see the problem isn't entirely you and your work. Because I'm this is what you've asked me to do, and then I will just go and here's where I've done it. And maybe you haven't. We're not perfect, and sometimes we're okay, yes, this piece is more important and we can add to it. But I think that brief is really important. I think that's why it is so important when you start a project. Just like I was saying with feedback, is to take time. It's to also get all of those questions out. Get that brief before the meeting, so you can review it and get those questions ready. You really, and we still get it wrong a lot of the times. I don't want to say wrong, but communication is just so funny. You just assume, oh yeah, this is what they want, and they assume this is what you're going to do, and then it's not. So how can you get those assumptions out early, and then increase your odds of success and lower your risk of failure, so they'll hire you again.
Another important question that comes to my mind is that currently the line between marketing and advertising is getting blurred a bit. There's a lot of this moment marketing that's happening where you're supposed to react or speak at the time where you think that the customer or the consumer is more likely to interact or engage with you. And that calls for a very good copy. and also calls for some bit of relevance. I have two questions here. One is that is it is it intelligent, or is it right for the brands to clamor for moment marketing for every possible opportunity? Uh, how much of relevance is important, and then how much of a good copy? I'll give you an example. Currently, the kind of situation the entire world is going through, everyone is trying to say something, right? Whether or not it's part of their world or their product, but somewhere they're trying to kind of be seen and heard, and there's also this FOMO. Everyone is
Mhm.
talking. If I don't talk, am I
Yeah.
going to be missed? Or or it could be the other, because everyone is talking, you are going to be lost. What's your
Yeah.
perception about this?
I think it's funny. Brands, especially, when coronavirus first started, um, they all felt like, oh, the world needed to hear from us. It was kind of laughable. I think what's changing in advertising and marketing is it's less about what you say and more about what you do. And I think the brands who did it right did stuff. They helped, they donated PPE, they started making protective gear. But yeah, making people didn't need to hear from you. They needed help, and they still do. Obviously, in India, we know they need help more than anyone right now. And so, man, it's pretty, I don't know, narcissistic of brands to think, okay, we need to get a message out. So let's, whatever, discount our Happy Meals at McDonald's or whatever, tell people we've got their backs. It's just so hollow. So I think, the brands who do well are the brands who have a distinct brand, and know themselves. They know when to speak or act and do. It's like the brand almost informs you. I think it can be difficult, but I think it's also, what I think a strong brand is a strong relationship with people. You're more than just a product. And so it should be something more personal than an ad on TV. And yeah, to your point, you would have been smarter to wait, because just like creativity, the first ideas are usually the worst and bad. And if you do it quickly, that's what I kind of, from a creative standpoint, loved about all of those ads being the same at the beginning of COVID. It shows you need time, because we all come to the same conclusions creatively. Like, you have to ask the more interesting questions to get more interesting work. Nobody took the time to do that. And it's such a great example for companies and brands to be more thoughtful and to take more time, because it can completely backfire. And I think it did. You could just predict what was coming. But like creativity, when it's like the bad first round, then it just gets better and better. And you saw the work get more thoughtful. Brands were like, oh, clearly this is not about what to say. We need to do something. And it was pretty awesome. It's a great lesson that I'm sure most brands won't learn. But I kind of love seeing that very predictable work, that you could just take this voiceover and put it over, I'm going to just say Nissan, not that they did it, maybe they did, and slap that same voiceover over another brand, and it would have worked. It was just so bad.
In this, what we find is that while the brands need time to think through what could be their response, it's also the copywriter. What makes a good copy? Because as someone who's writing the copy, you need to be convinced yourself first before you actually take your work out to the world. So what makes a good copy?
In terms of craft, it's hard to say anything that we don't already know and hear. It has to be short. Everyone says be conversational, but that seems most people still don't know what that means, because when you read it, it's not conversational. People use shorter words, and they think, okay, I'm not going to use any big words, and that's conversational. But it really means how you talk. And I think some people are also afraid to break the rules of grammar, never starting a sentence with but or and. I think also you have to, as a writer, an effective communicator, whether it's to keep interest, is pay attention to what feels right. And that's often wrong. It's not that it's wrong, it's that it's very common, and that's what everyone says. And those are great opportunities to like twist something. For my newsletter, everyone's saying, subscribe to my newsletter. I have been lately going, unsubscribe to my newsletter. It stands out a little bit. It's twisting, and it plays off a truth. Most of us are like, oh, why would I subscribe to this thing? I'm just going to unsubscribe anyways, or I have enough email. I don't know if that's the best example, but I do think there are times, especially with social, that people don't have a brand voice in social. They have a social voice in social. And so they all sound the same. So I think, you have to make sure it's in line with your brand's personality, not speaking whatever a social voice is, and you see everyone's using the same language. Editing for sure. And then we talk about there's just never any time. But really, if you look back, as far as like people have written about the creative process, you don't just need time to do it. You need time to walk away from it and come back to it. When I have a piece of writing, and really it's like there's no ending, there's just a deadline and then it's done. There is no perfection. But you do need time, and you have to edit. We're not getting time to walk away, but we do know the channels now. And I think maybe I said this earlier, but that's why it's so important to have a process, is we can speed things up. I think you have to get ahead of things it's almost like predictive creative. You know what's coming, but we always just wait. And then, there's a fire and we need a writer, we need an art director or a designer. But you know what's coming, and to be a bit more proactive, which we have to do, and we have to find ways to do that. Because then, if you know, let's say on social, what your creative pillars are or what your content is, I think like, let's say Instagram, that's a network, a TV network, and they have all these different shows. So thinking about it, like, what are your shows? Everyone in the creative department, you could have a shared doc where you're like, I had an idea for, maybe it's the brand's values and we're like purpose driven and about personal growth. I had a thought or an insight around that tied into this product or this for people. And you can just add ideas. And so you have a starting point. You're not starting from nothing. And I think anything good, copy-wise, creative-wise, has some sort of relatable truth in it, a human insight, as opposed to just, a product feature. What is the human insight or benefit of that feature that can improve my life or add value to my life?
Final question to you is, the art of business storytelling that we see evolving now, and we are practitioners of that ourselves, that's where the principles of advertising is actually coming into the way we write our marketing copy, our content. How do you see this marriage? How do you see this marriage between marketing and advertising in a way that the content is now, this is a cliche that content is king, but today the content is actually coming out and connecting to people. So how do you see this business storytelling as a discipline, and how much do you think that the advertising principles are applicable here?
I think they're very applicable, and because I think, if I take a piece of copy, it has to be short. And it's not just because, short, you're being respectful of people's time. And so I think whatever stories we're telling, we have to keep that in mind, being respectful of time, being human and relatable. I think that goes across both. Not talking about yourself too much. I think it's thinking of your brand or story. If you're communicating to another person and we're representing companies, is thinking about those companies as a person, and not like this big company talking down to people. There are equals and providing value to our customers. I think I also, when I look at things, and the easy way to evaluate it is, like, we seem to separate ourselves a lot. Like, consumers are different and like aliens. It's like, no, I am, my wife is, my mom is a consumer. And so I think to just, would they like it? Would I like this? I think is a good evaluator. They're not different than I am. And so looking at it from that lens, I think, yeah, creativity and copywriting and business storytelling are all the same. And I think, you look at any of it, even structure, beginning, middle, end, headline, copy, and the wrap up. If it's about one theme, the headline is something emotional that captures attention, just like a 6-second YouTube pre-roll. You don't want them to skip. The beginning is so important. Most people will skip. Most people won't read past your headline. But yeah, if you can grab them there, and then the copy builds on that theme, and then the last sentence or the end wraps it all up. Storytelling in beginning, middle, end structure. And I think every piece of communication should have that.
Thank you very much, Dan. It was a pleasure speaking to you, and I'm sure our viewers would have learned quite a lot of things from you. And that's it in our session of Story Talkies this time. You can find Dan at his website, which is nelkencreative.com. That's where I think you can find him there, and you can get some tips, and you can also subscribe to his newsletter. You can subscribe to ours too. Please subscribe to Story Talkies, and you'll be getting all the new interviews as we do. And you please keep a watch at our newsletter, which will be going out to you shortly. Every month we come up with new stories, something that will keep you engaged, something that is food for thought. With that, I'm signing off. Happy birthday to us because we are turning 1, and happy listening to you because we'll be coming back with more stories. Thanks a lot.